Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to Thinktank, Birmingham Science Museum, and to tonight's Lunar Society seminar, From Leonardo to You. The present-day Lunar Society provides a dynamic forum for its membership to influence change through focusing and informing debate, linking social, economic, scientific and cultural thinking, and catalysing action on issues critical to the common good. The original Lunar men gathered for lively dinner conversations, the journey back from their meeting places lit by the full moon. Today's Lunar Society has several hundred members and includes leading practitioners from all walks of life in Birmingham and the wider region. People who are prepared to help shape the scientific, political and social agenda, not just here in Birmingham and the West Midlands, but nationally and internationally. Tonight, Sally Hoban and Jon Wood will give a lecture on the inextricable link between scientists and artists over the centuries. Sally Hoban is a freelance art and design historian, journalist and writer, including arts reviews for The Lancet and features for the Times Higher Educational Supplement. Also researching a PhD part-time at the University of Birmingham, she has taught at Birmingham and Aston Universities and currently works part-time as the Heritage and Training Officer at the Birmingham Assay Office. As an accredited lecturer of the National Association of Decorative and Fine Arts Societies, author of the book Miller's Collecting Modern Design, and has broadcast on BBC TV and radio, most recently with BBC 4 for a forthcoming programme on silver as part of the Made in Britain series. Jon Wood has been a scientist since he first tried to remove all the iron filings from the garden using a magnet. Trained in biomedical sciences, he has worked in pathology, specialising in microbiology and parasitology. He has taught in the psychology programme and contributed to neuroscience research at Aston University. During this time, he has also published research in learning and teaching methods. He is now focusing his attention on the role that public engagement plays in directing science research and the benefits that outreach activity has in the wider community. He likewise has appeared on the BBC. Jon and Sally now work together on a variety of interdisciplinary research projects. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm welcome to Sally and Jon and this evening's event From Leonardo to You.
It was a teenage wedding and the old folks wished them well. You could see that Pierre did truly love the mademoiselle. And now the young monsieur and madame have rung the chapel bell. C'est la vie, say the old folks. It goes to show you never can tell.
The thing is, we can look around the room and we consider ourselves to be either fans of humanities or the arts or sciences. But the thing is, looking at each other, we never can tell truly when we look and see where we really are. If you just, actually, I'd like to vote you just for a second. Can we do the voting now? If you have voting handsets at the side, you'll find that there's more than 3 buttons on there, but I'm not going to ask more than 3 questions. If you're an artist, I'd like you to press A. Or a fan of the humanities, press A. If you understand that. If you are a scientist, press B. If you think that it could be something a little bit different, please go with C. Just a quick vote, because I'm not quite sure who we've got here. I reckon there's some faces that are a bit.
Sorry, there's not A, B, C, there's 1, 2, 3.
1, 2 or 3, let's go with 1, 2 or 3. So press 1 for arts. So we have quite a mixed bunch in the room. Some believe that are part of the humanities, some scientists, and some 41%. I'm not quite sure where you want to sit, and I quite like that. I quite like that. That's brilliant, thank you. Right, so we are going to talk about From Leonardo to You. What we're going to do is, I'm going to highlight first of all the fact that we do face challenges, and we do. We face challenges on a social, on an environmental, on a public nature, all different things, like financial problems, all these problems that we face. Apart from our own personal responsibility to play a part in solving these, I want to ask you, where does the responsibility lie? Does it lie with the humanities? Does it lie with science? Whose shoulders does it actually sit with? Now the thing is, if we do have to be, for instance, a scientist or an engineer to be able to contribute to solving the problem of environmental control, do we have to be that? Now with this lecture, what we're hoping to do is provide some examples that we think are really interesting over the last 600 years or so of people who were maybe scientists, but who worked with or were inspired by artists. And also artists who we may think of as artists, but necessarily have been inspired by sciences and or have worked alongside scientists. And what we're hoping to do is bring these together and show how they have, when they have worked together, contributed to the world of human knowledge and experience.
Some of the examples that we're going to show you are drawn from academics all across the world. They're taken from the history of art, and some of them are taken from science. We don't necessarily agree with what some of the people are saying or suggesting in their academic research. But what we want to highlight to you is the interdisciplinary nature of what they're doing. We think that in academia there needs to be a greater drive towards interdisciplinary work. People no longer thinking of themselves as a particular type of person in academia. And we think that can only enrich the academic experience in the longer term. So do look at the examples that we've shown you, and perhaps we can talk about them in questions at the end. We want to talk about the links between art and science, but this isn't a completely new thing. It's becoming more popular and more people are becoming interested in linking the arts and the sciences. However, one of the first people to actually do this and to start to argue this earlier in the century was C.P. Snow, the novelist C.P. Snow. And this somewhat sober-looking publication that you can see on the screen is The Two Cultures and the Scientific Revolution, which he delivered as the Reed Lecture at Cambridge University in 1959. And in it, C.P. Snow made a very powerful case that the arts and the sciences should try and work more closely together, because he thought that it was detrimental that they moved into these two cultures. His ideas have been developed very much further in the present day, and we're going to talk about that later in the lecture, and the idea of a new culture in the humanities and the sciences developing now. We're going to talk about that later. So this idea of bringing artists and scientists closer together was first suggested earlier in this century, but of course it's nothing new. And we couldn't help but include Matthew Bolton here on the right-hand side and James Watt. I have to say I'm delighted to see them on the £50 note and their historical importance being recognised on a more national level rather than just on the Midlands. Bolton and Watt, of course, were members of the original Lunar Society, and what the original Lunar Society tried to do through their work was to bring the idea of natural philosophy to the forefront in terms of debate, scientific solutions, and making experiments, very much at the heart of the Enlightenment of the late 18th century. And we might talk about the Enlightenment and think that the Enlightenment was just one thing, but if you look at the work of more modern historians, we're actually suggesting now that the Enlightenment was happening in pockets all over Europe, and people were moving towards these new ideas and then eventually working together. And that's something that we might like to think about, maybe the idea of a new culture of Enlightenment, where groups of artists or scientists are coming up with ideas and then maybe sharing them and moving them closer together. We're going to talk about the links between art and science, and I've just mentioned the Enlightenment, and if you want a visual depiction of the Enlightenment, then you really don't have to look much further than this, which is Joseph Wright of Derby's wonderful experiment on a bird in an air pump, which dates from 1768. And for me, as a social historian and an art historian, this image just sums up so many of those enlightened ideas that were happening in Europe at the time. Right at the centre, this gentleman here is a travelling itinerant natural philosopher. As the Enlightenment grew and educated circles became more interested in science, it became very fashionable for travelling scientists to move from town to town and give public lectures in science about these new scientific ideas. But also they would travel into wealthy houses, so the grey middle class were becoming interested in science and also early technology, and they would have gathered as a social event to see an experiment such as this with this visiting natural philosopher. What I particularly love about this image, looking at it and analysing from an art historian's perspective, is what it tells us about what was happening in the culture at the time, but also this image that you can see here. It's so powerful. He's literally pulling the contemporary viewers into the future, into this enlightened future that people were imagining. But also he's almost doing that to us now. It's a really strong central image, that, in terms of the painting. So John, tell us a little bit more about the science that's actually happening in this image.
Well, the science is, as it says on the tin, it's an experiment on a bird in an air pump. And if you think about that, there's only one natural conclusion for that, and it doesn't look good for the bird. But the thing is here is that these people did have scientific journals. This is not a new experiment that has been shown. This is actually one of Robert Hooke's experiments from 100 years before this painting was even done. And yet, we still see a man demonstrating this here for the public. It wasn't new science. Science journals did exist. So I'm thinking that this is actually more like, well, public communication with science. In fact, this man probably wouldn't have been that much of a scientist. What he may have been is more of a showman. And showmen did this. They would go along and then you would go to the town hall or a public place and you would actually see an extravaganza of a showman doing something that resembled science. And that's great. It was actually captured beautifully by Joseph Wright in this particular image. Now, this record is a still picture. A picture does paint 1,000 words. And just like in the same way that those words were captured in the era of the Lunar Society, it's no different today. We still capture those pictures. The only difference is that those pictures now move. That man would be on television. That man would be Brian Cox, but with better hair. That man would be Jim Al-Khalili, with less hair. That man would be somebody who would have his science packaged and then broadcast. And in this way, Joseph Wright did a wonderful job of actually doing broadcasting whatever the science is. However, what if you didn't need to work in such a collaborative way? What about if you didn't need the artist to package it for you? What about if you were someone who was great as an artist, but also great as a scientist? Any suggestions for any particular one that fits that bill? Yes, okay, it's a rhetorical question, it is. Leonardo, we see his most famous works, and we're aware of them. We're aware that he was an inventor. I love his helicopter that screws itself into the air, it's just wonderful. A man very fond of military hardware, and that's his first tank. A flying device. It was a device from Anatomical. I wonder how much George Lucas was actually inspired by that for Star Wars. But however, his human figures, the man resting, wonderful. His botanical studies, also, his botanical studies. He was also interested in the way, for instance, that objects moved through water, and he captured beautifully the way that the water moved. His anatomical studies, his studies on fetuses. Fetuses or feti? What's the plural for fetuses? I don't know. More of his anatomical studies, beautifully detailed, accurately documenting what was happening. But I'm really interested in when he combined these things together. For instance, we see the same sort of expansion of the flying device, but we see that it's very much now based upon the anatomical studies. I can actually just see somebody at the Red Bull flu tag or something just trying to run along the platform and flapping their wings and then trying desperately to maintain some level of air before they actually hit the water. So there we have an example of Leonardo. And while I'm talking about anatomical studies, just wondering whether anybody recognises these. I'll read you a section. I'll let you read it as well. It arises from the superior curved line of the ilium and a portion of the bone, including the crest immediately behind it. From the posterior surface of the last piece of the sacrum, the sides of the coccyx, and the posterior surface of the great sacrosciatic and posterior sacroiliac ligaments. I think I cut that down because it just would not fit on the page. Any suggestions where that might be? It's fine, it's fine. Okay, what about the second one? Second one is a ganglionoid or a hinge joint. Bones entering into its formation are the trochlear surface of the humerus, which is received from the greater sigmoid cavity of the ulna. In the midst of the movements peculiar to this joint, those of flexion and extension. Isn't it a mouthful? I can breathe now. Does anybody know what that is? The elbow, yeah, it's the ulnar thing gives it away, really, doesn't it? However, it's dark side. for those of you that can't tell the difference between your arse and your elbow, we have the words of Henry Gray in Gray's Anatomy, and they're wonderful and detailed. It's so precise. But they don't tell us anywhere near as much beauty as the pictures that were captured by Henry van Dyke Carter, who was an accomplished surgeon, and let's be honest, a wonderful artist. Because when we look at these, we really do get the flavour of what he was actually trying to say in those words. In fact, Henry van Dyke Carter realised how important his pictures were to Gray's Anatomy that he asked for an equal credit on the book. He didn't get it because he insisted, Henry Gray insisted that, well, no, you can have the little letters on the bottom of the page, on the bottom of the book. And so it was always known as Gray's Anatomy rather than Gray's and Carter's Anatomy. But that was really quite an interesting thing of how, without those pictures, it would have been different. Now, Henry van Dyke Carter would have gone through every biology class that you and I have ever gone through. He would have stained sections of stem cells, stem sections, for instance, looking for phloem and xylem when the water and food move up and down the plant. Stained them. I didn't because I liked the smell of the eosinophil, but that had got nothing to do with it. Anyway, while we're continuing in the theme of medicine in art, I'm going to introduce you to Piero di Cosimo's A Satire Mourning Over a Nymph. I'll tell you the story of this. The plan is that the daughter of the king of Athens is tragically being killed by her husband in a deer hunting accident. However, there is a gentleman, and it's a great piece of art, you can go and see it in the gallery. However, galleries are where you go to see art. But there's a professor named Professor Michael Bell, and what he does, he's one of the country's leading cancer experts, but he is also a professor of medical humanities at University College London. Now he takes his students to the art gallery. Why does he take them to the gallery? Well, he shows them this picture and he shows them other pictures, and he points out, based on his 20 years of sleuthing around these, different alternative interpretations of these pictures, including some medical diagnoses. And this one, he tells a slightly different story. First of all, he points to the lacerations on the hand and says, well, that doesn't look like an accident, that looks more like sort of injury that is sustained via fending off an attack. I'm not convinced of that. However, he does further point to the wound on the neck. And he says, well, this is sort of a wound that would happen to a major trauma to the C5 and C6 parts of your spine. It starts at the top with the atlas, that's C1, and then with the axis, that's C2, and then it goes C3, C4, C5, C6, and then it goes into the thoracic bit, and then you start to come down your back, and it starts to get very difficult to point them out. However, between C5 and C6, it also if you have an injury there, the most foul injury there, it also presents another thing as well. It sort of shows this waiter's tip. I demonstrate the waiter's tip. So, backhander, sometimes called the policeman's tip, but I don't want to get political. But the waiter's tip is how it's described as being a trauma to the brachial plexus, which is the nerve that comes out the spine and down your shoulder. However, it does make me raise a question. If this sitter wasn't actually posing just as an accident, if this person did actually suffer murder most foul in order to be to end up with Piero di Cosimo before he painted this, where did he get his sitters from? It is a wonder. This is another one of his works. This is Venus and Mars and Cupid. Even this close to Valentine's Day. They say that Luke is dead, but I'd be disappointed if Cupid looked like that. I don't think that necessarily he used as many live people as he could have done. However, I'm interested again in this very similar waiter's tip thing that's on Mars. I'm aware that in the previous one, Mars was definitely not a boy. And here, that doesn't look to me to be the physique of a boy either. I know it's been sort of androgenized because that was the fashion of the pictures at the time. But I'm very keen to see this. Was this the same model? Did he use the same model twice for two pictures? That's my question. And I think if he was that, then maybe he was, if he was using corpses, was he using them and trying to keep it hidden that he was using corpses in his paintings? So you've got examples of somebody that didn't even bother trying to cover that fact up, haven't you?
This is one of the greatest scientific depictions of an anatomy lesson in the history of art. It is, of course, by Rembrandt, and it's the anatomy lesson of Dr. Torp, which is in The Hague if you want to go and see it, and it's 1632. And for me, with my art historian's perspective on rather than Jon's more science perspective, I look at this with an art historian's head, and it tells me lots of different things about the culture in Holland at the time, and it also ties in with these ideas of the developing enlightenment and people becoming very interested in the way things worked, particularly the human body. It also tells me that it was very fashionable to be interested in anatomical studies and interested in science. And there's a lot of similarities, I think, between the ideas behind this painting and the image of Joseph Wright that I showed you earlier, this idea of wanting to understand how the human body worked. In this case, you have this extremely realistic depiction here of the corpse and the anatomical lesson. Dr. Torp was very famous within Amsterdam. Importantly, he charged people to actually go into his anatomy sessions and lessons. And we have this same sort of commentary going on in this picture here as we had in the earlier experiment on a bird. Because these would have been the wealthy of Amsterdam, the wealthy burghers of Amsterdam. And look at the way that Rembrandt has painted their curiosity and this sense of newness, looking in at this medical depiction. These gentlemen aren't here to learn how to be doctors. These gentlemen are in this scene because it was fashionable and because they wanted to be seen, to be interested in the new ideas. So we can learn a lot about social history from these images too. And in terms of the science of this, of course, we can look at it and we can get a basic understanding of anatomy from looking at this painting as a record of an anatomy class. But in history of art, it's an image that tells us much, much more, and it's one of Rembrandt's greatest paintings, I think. Just to continue with the theme of Rembrandt, we mentioned some artists earlier, particularly Rembrandt, and you ask yourself, should we think of them as artists? But is there any way that we can also think of them as scientists, perhaps? And we're going to show you some examples shortly of how we can really see that Rembrandt might have been thinking in an early scientific way. And the images that I'm showing you on the screen are just some of the many self-portraits that Rembrandt painted throughout his career. He's one of the most prolific portrait painters in the history of Western art. Throughout his whole life, he documented himself, not only referring to the portraits that different artists were doing, the last one you saw was very much like Titian's paintings, but also I think he had a psychologist's eye all the time, looking at himself and how his life was being reflected through his own features, his own physiology. The paintings here, I don't know if you've noticed as we've gone through, you can see his progression from a young gentleman, a very successful young artist, to an old man. And if you know about Rembrandt's biography, you can see his life story in every single self-portrait that he painted. He was extremely successful early in his career. He had very wealthy patrons in Amsterdam. However, when he painted the Night Watch in 1642, which is really his masterpiece, his huge group portrait, which is in Amsterdam, he actually broke with the grounds of convention in terms of how group portraits were painted. And he made a very realistic scene. And that made him very unpopular amongst his wealthy patrons. He eventually lost a lot of commissions, his son eventually died, he lost his wife Saskia, and he ended up more or less penniless. We don't even know where Rembrandt is buried, and yet now we think of him as one of the greatest painters in Western art. So it's this interest in documenting himself, and is he trying to tell us something about his state of mind and his biography through his portraits, that appeals to me as an art historian, but also as a scientist as well. John, tell us a little bit more about Rembrandt.
Yeah, I think if we to understand it a little better, we do have to look inside. I focus on his etchings. I mean, these are just beautiful. I love them. But when I see these, coming at it from a scientific point of view, I worked with psychology people for a long time, and things seem to ring bells with me when I see pictures like this. I mean, these are very tiny pictures. But I'll introduce you just across the bottom an example of one of the pictures from the Karolinska Institute. Karolinska Institute, they put together a whole collection of different emotional faces. These are the Karolinska Institute emotion directed faces package. There's lots of them. This gentleman is just one of the examples, and they're shown from all different angles. But it's the emotions that are interesting. We use them to present to people, to show on screen, and people respond to them and go, oh, I recognise that emotion. That's, in this case, well, it's not quite neutral. It's quite ambiguous because this gentleman isn't a great actor. I'll be honest. If you look at Rembrandt, he's got a frown, he's disconcerted, and this gentleman here is supposed to be that. I think what we have is a little bit of disgust. Disgust? Everybody happy with disgust? What about the next one? What do we get from Rembrandt? Surprise! Yeah, we didn't get surprise from our gentleman from Karolinska as well. Surprise. The next one. Pain. I know pain is the good one. I think that you get pain from that, as well as frustration and anger. You get so much more from Rembrandt than you get from the gentleman at the bottom that's just going, huh? He looks like he's just been given the car parking bill. But it's true. I think he's going to anger. But there we go. And the last one, I'm sure we know the last one. The last one is definitely happiness. But while on the subject of happiness, does anybody know the difference between a fake smile and a real smile? Everybody? Yeah? When we see it? Yeah?
Number of muscles.
It's in the eyes. Who said that? You said that's wonderful. It is, it's in the eyes. In fact, to get a real smile, you have to engage what are called the zygomatic major muscles. It's in Gray's book, don't bother reading it, look for the pictures instead. The zygomatic major muscles, and it pulls her, and it's wonderful, geez, you're good. You smile, it really engages the eyes. However, quick snapshot. Are the eyes engaged?
No.
Rubbish. Okay, Rembrandt would have been a different picture altogether. Rembrandt would have had this as an etching. I'd probably done it in a mirror or something like that. So it would have been a case of and he would have done it like that. The difference is that Rembrandt knew the difference between a fake smile and a real smile. And he knew that because he could draw it. And if you think about this is quite wonderful. Rembrandt knew properly how to read our emotions from our faces, more than this gentleman here did in the 20th century. So I'm thinking now that Rembrandt, not necessarily just one of the greatest artists that we've ever had, but I'm also thinking of him as one of the first psychologists. One of the first people to actually look at emotional recognition in faces. And that's kind of important, really, because it was his livelihood. If he couldn't paint emotions in a picture, then he wouldn't have been much of an artist. But he was. And so we can see that. So maybe he was more of a scientist than we think of him. Maybe this was the secret that he really kept hidden from us. Now, anyway, talking of things being hidden. Is anybody familiar with this? Sally?
This is lovely. This is, of course, Hans Hoban the Younger's beautiful The Ambassadors. We call it The Ambassadors, but the identity of the two sitters is constantly being debated amongst art historians. So there's various different ideas, thought to be connected to the court of Henry VIII through being French ambassadors, but the most latest theory is that this gentleman here is a cleric as well, not necessarily an ambassador from the clothes and the general setting. Now, I love this painting as a portrait. Hoban, like Rembrandt, was very, very good at portraiture. It's in the National Gallery if you want to go and see it. But I'm also interested in what he's trying to tell us about the sitters through this. He's portraying the ambassadors as very much cultured gentlemen. They're familiar with science, early science, because of the selection of scientific instruments. There's a terrestrial globe on there, a celestial globe. But also the inclusion of the lute is telling us that they're interested in music and in the arts as well. So he's very much depicting a portrait of very rounded, very cultured individuals. It's a very sumptuous painting, and in terms of the history of portraiture, it really is one of the most successful. However, what most people will remember this painting for is the area here, which is a very interesting example of an artist using a scientific visual illusion in a painting. John, tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, you can't really see it from this perspective, but you can do this in the National Gallery. If you move and you go to that perspective, all of a sudden, what you see is what the artist intended you to see, but only if you stood at a certain angle. And it's an anamorphic skull. And notice it's beautiful. It actually, that is the same picture, but literally just viewed that from a different perspective. The incorporation of visual illusions into imagery is a wonderful example. Again, it's the sort of thing that we've been looking at as psychologists for many, many years, and we still enjoy doing that today. However, sometimes, in this case, we have to change our physical perspective to be able to view something hidden. However, sometimes we have to look a little deeper into our brains to be able to find what we're trying to do, and maybe how we can decode what is an abstract world around us. So I'm going to introduce you to a friend of mine who is illuminate Ishai, and rather than me introduce you, I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Fondation Baylor near Basel, illuminate Ishai visits the Museum of Modern Art with a friend. She's more than a personal interest in the exhibits. Illuminate Ishai didn't just study biology. She also completed a degree in philosophy in Jerusalem. She's fascinated by the philosophy of the ancient Greeks, and she draws comparisons between the modern, highly technical brain research of today and the old philosophical questions concerning human existence.
The ancient Greeks asked very deep questions about the world, what is matter, what does exist, about consciousness, how does the mind work, etc., etc. And I think in modern day brain imaging research, we also try to do the same, namely to answer how does the brain represent the world around us.
It's true. One of the things that she's doing is she's actually using images like this to be able to do that. Can anybody, just off the top of their head, tell me what they think they see? What do you see? Breakfast. That's true. Oh yes, that's a good one. I've never had that one actually. Breakfast. Breakfast. Actually, it's called an indeterminate art. And the more you look at it, you glimpse at it and you think, oh, I can see oh, I can't. Surely I can make out, oh, no, that's not there either. No. You look at it, and the more you look at it, the less you actually recognise. Now, how does the brain decode this? This is one of the examples of what Alomit was doing, and let her explain how she did it.
Images with indeterminate visual input evoke curiosity. Abstract art challenges, even overwhelms the human capacity to understand images. And this is precisely the reason that Alumni Ishai employs abstract art in her research.
Yeah, we're going to start the experiment soon, and this way will be presented with art paintings. You just have to look at them and decide if you see any familiar content.
Impressionists, Cubists, testing subjects' brains using classic modernist images.
Even when real objects do not exist in the painting, the brain is still trying to make something meaningful out of this painting. And we believe that the brain is always generating hypotheses about what is it that we are looking at. And the subjects use memory and associations in order to figure out what is it that they are looking at.
Okay, so Alomit is a neuroscientist, but she studied philosophy and art, and she's using Cubism to be able to understand and examine how our brains actually work. But, I mean, I've never been a fan of Cubist art because they always have a label underneath and need to be able to understand it. And so because I just wonder, other than how Alomit is using it, does Cubism actually have a purpose? There's so much art there, I couldn't see wood for the trees. And then somebody pointed out to me, well, it's all about the ships, isn't it? I went, what ships? I see no ships. And they went, but no, about the ships. And they said, okay, here's a problem. How do you hide that? It's the RMS Mauritania. How big is the ship? Rather large ship there. But the thing is, how would you hide that in wartime to stop them being torpedoed? Or do you give the problem to the scientists? Or scientists, great, anti-jamming radar, do we have a cloaking device? No, not for Star Trek. There are many different suggestions. The scientists would sit there and puzzle and try to think about how they would solve it. But it's not what they did. What they did is they painted it in Cubist-inspired art. And it was called dazzle camouflage. This is the USS Charles S. Sperry. 2,200 tons of destroyer. One ship. But it looks a little bit weird, doesn't it? It looks as though we're not quite sure which way it's going or where it's heading. She did that. She survived 2 US wars, saw action in Korea and even in the Suez Canal. She clearly survived because she wasn't scrapped until 1990. But do you want to see an example of one moving? Because I think it makes a little bit more sense. I'll hand over to a good friend James May for that.
Is actually very convincing. That looks like an optical illusion, as if it's got more than one hull. It could be going left to right or right to left. It could be coming sort of 45 degrees towards me. So that could make a torpedo miss by a mile, quite literally. That's very impressive, even in carpool. It was a big paint job. Thousands of ships really were finished in Dazzle camouflage. But unfortunately, Dazzle couldn't protect ships from air attack, and as more and more aeroplanes took to the skies, it was gradually phased out. And that left the world a duller place. But all told, it was the biggest art exhibition of the century.
It was indeed. You have to give credit for that. It was beautifully painted. Anyway, from exhibitions to exhibitionalism. Sally, this is one for you, I think.
I'm sure this really needs no introduction. Michelangelo's most famous work of creating Adam in the Sistine Chapel. However, we're showing you this not really for its art historical context. We're actually showing you this as an example of what we talked about at the beginning of the lecture, where groups of people are actually looking at paintings in the history of art from a scientific perspective and making some quite controversial suggestions about it. So do have a look at this one. Some of you may already know about this one or have seen it, but we've actually got copies of the paper in the publisher's academic paper, what I'm going to show you about in a moment. So here, of course, we have what you would normally, 2 things you would normally look at if you're standing looking at this image, either in a book or if you're actually in the Sistine Chapel. Number 1, crucial point, the moment that the fingers are about to touch, and of course Adam here, which is a great example of exhibitionism, this perfect gentleman in the history of art. But what I want you to look at for a moment is the structure that's here. Just look at that cloak that's surrounding God there, and just hold that image in your mind for a moment. In the meantime, I'm going to introduce you to Jon's brain.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's beautiful, isn't it? That's actually lovely. If there's any neuroscientists in here, neuroanatomists, anything like that, don't tell me. I don't want to know. I like surprises. If you see something wrong, don't tell me. That is actually my MRI, just across the road at Aston University. It's wonderful. I'm going to highlight some structures, not some of the fun ones, because there's lots. There's my eyes, and my teeth, and everything. Here are some. Okay, starting from the top. You can see the general outline of my brain. That's the grey matter. Okay, you can see the bits that are grey are actually there, the bits that are white on the inside are the bits that actually support the grey matter and keep the grey matter all joined together. You know your brain is in 2 halves. You have a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere. One sits here, one sits here. And what happens is they do talk to each other through a really long bundle of fibres that run through the middle. That's called the corpus callosum. That's that bit there. You'll see it come up in a second. There it is. That's the bundle of fibres that join the 2 halves of the brains together. What do we have? The brainstem, the pons, and this is the cerebellum. It looks like cauliflower. Wonderful. Here we have the vertebral artery, and this is a slice coming down from. This is my optic chiasm here, where the bits from my eyes cross over. Left eye looked after by the right side of the brain, and the right eye looked after by the left side of the brain. But they cross over. When they cross over, it's called chiasm. It's wonderful. And this here is my pituitary gland. That's responsible for all the grief I had as a teenager. However, I'm just going to overlay these together now, so that they all look sort of overlaid. And I'm going to reintroduce the picture over here of that. And this is where it starts to get a bit funny, because these people here, and no respect to the neuroscientists, actually say, well, there's some sort of similarity here. And in fact, they say the notion of the commixture of sacred and the profane remains speculative, I agree, and probably controversial, I most certainly agree, but at the same time fascinating and provocative. And the question I ask is, well, hang on, if Michelangelo deliberately painted this in the shape of a brain, was he having a laugh? Or, really, how did he have access to that sort of knowledge. Did he have dealings with scientists where he was able to go and look at slices of brain and bits of brain and do that? There's a lot more to our artists than we actually realise and actually, or rather than they were prepared to admit to. It is quite controversial. And this is the work of these particular gentlemen, scattered throughout the UK, very well respected institutions, neuroanatomists, neurosurgeons, neuroscientists. They've come up with some different interpretations for some other Renaissance art as well. And it's quite interesting. I like it because it's just an interdisciplinary way of looking at things. They're actually drawing on some of their knowledge of art to be able to bring it. And one of the things that I think, from a learning and teaching point of view, this is great, because I'll never forget it now. I'll never forget which bits of my brain do which, because I just look at this and go, oh, well, that bit's there, and that bit's there, and that's fine. I know where the Sylvian fissure is now, because it's just at the arm, which is kind of, I never really knew before. However, talking of things being controversial and raising questions, who likes that?
Okay, can you vote again? Is it 1 or 2 or only?
1 or 2.
1 or 2. If you like the image on the screen, please press number 1. If you don't like it, please press number 2.
It's a bit exciting there. Ooh, okay.
Ooh, interesting. Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. First of all, for those of you who recognise this type of image, it's not a Jackson Pollock, I have to say, but we are going to talk about Jackson Pollock in a moment. What we want to do with this image is tell you a little bit more about the idea of scientists working more closely looking at works of art, and how works of art that we might not necessarily look at and think might have a deeper scientific meaning actually do. And this is a gentleman who's doing quite a lot of work in this area. Now, a lot of people, when they look at this type of art, abstract expressionist art, particularly the work of Jackson Pollock, if they're not art historians or they don't have a very high appreciation of art and they don't like it very much, the thing that people will say is, I could do that. And that's the phrase that everybody always uses. When I teach this type of art to school groups, they always say, oh, I could do that. But actually, we're going to show you some research that actually says that actually, no, you can't just do that. There's a much deeper underlying structure to this. So this is done by drip painting technique, which is what Jackson Pollock did with his canvases. He looked like, if you see footage of him, we'll show you some in a minute, it looks like he's just walking up and down and dripping paint onto a canvas in a totally random way. We're going to show you something in a minute that might make you change your mind about that. So it depends who you ask about this image as to what's actually going on. So John, tell us a bit more about
It's true, yes. This gentleman, this straw poll, artist or scientist, what do you think? Do you think he's an artist or a scientist? He both, good call. Maybe something there. That's both. You're actually right. This man is Professor Richard Taylor. He trained at the Manchester School of Art. But not until he'd spent quite some years teaching physics in Australia. And now he works at the University of Oregon. He's a trained painter and he's a photographer. However, his interdisciplinary approach is really interesting to me. What he studies now are the natural patterns that happen, called fractals, and they happen all around us and in nature, physics, and he's up to them in psychology and clouds and geography and architecture, and including art, and specifically the art of Jackson Pollock. But how do you study science actually using this art? How do you study the art in a scientific way? Well, this is one of the way that he does it. He actually makes his own art. And again, I'm going to let my friend Marcus the Sorto deal with this one.
It's all based on this apparatus called the Pollockizer.
The Pollockizer?
Now, what it is essentially, though, is what's called a kicked pendulum. And as you know, a basic pendulum is very, very regular, like a clock. But at the top here, what you've got is a little device that can actually knock the string as it's swinging around. And that induces a very different type of motion called chaotic motion.
So this would be like Pollock's hand. This would be what he'd be trying to achieve with that sort of off-balance painting that he's doing.
Absolutely. So they're very similar processes.
It's very effective.
By recreating his technique, the Pollockizer is able to mimic one particular aspect of the artist's work. And that is that it appears more or less the same, no matter how closely you look.
You keep on seeing these patterns unfolding in front of you. And with a Pollock painting, all of those patterns at different size scales look the same.
This is a property known as fractal. More than any other painter, Jackson Pollock was able to consistently repeat the same level of complexity at different scales throughout his paintings. The fractal quality of his work appeals to us because despite seeming abstract, it actually mirrors the reality of the world around us.
When we started to actually analyse the buried patterns in there, this amazing thing emerged. Deep down hidden in there is this level of mathematical structure.
So it's this really delicate interplay between something that looks messy and chaotic, but actually it has structure and some underlying code hidden inside it.
Absolutely, and you can see it not only in his paintings, but you see it everywhere. You know, like a tree outside, you look at the tree from far away, you see this big trunk with a few branches going off. Superficially they look cluttered and they look incredibly complex, but your eye can sense that there's a sort of underlying mathematical structure to it all. Pollock was the first person to actually put it on canvas in a direct fashion that no other artist has ever done. It really is the basic fingerprints of nature.
Now, I was never a fan of Pollock's work. I ate breakfast, was the word that we mentioned earlier about the Robert Pepperell images, and I love Robert Pepperell stuff, and it's in eternity. But Pollock I never really understood, until I realised the scientific basis behind what he was actually doing. As has been said, many people have tried to copy Pollock's work, but they've never managed to actually do it to the same level of complexity. In fact, not only did he manage to create works of art that had this level of complexity, he actually got better at being able to spot where it was. Now that's okay, you think, right, well, he knew the science. No, he didn't. That's the paper. He didn't have the science. The science didn't come for many years after Pollock had finished painting it, which was really, really interesting, because he was actually painting what he felt to be the word fractal, but he didn't even have the word fractal. But it wasn't until after that that we realised quite how important his work really, really is, certainly from a scientific point of view. In fact, as many people have tried to copy it, this gentleman, Richard Taylor, is actually able to analyse the work and say, yes, that's a Pollock, and no, that's not, because it doesn't have the same level of fractal complexity. Big, long words, but it's very, very interesting the way that he did it. However, even though he didn't know the science, Jackson Pollock actually managed to capture and actually improve his technique of being able to hone it. So, I love that example, because not only do we have an artist who, even though he didn't have all the words, understood some level of science and felt a level of science about it, we also have a scientist who is an artist studying the art in a scientific fashion. And I love that. I love the fact that in order to fully understand this art, he's having to look at it using computers. Now, we've shown you some examples so far of people that have been either inspired by artists, scientists, or artists that have been inspired by scientists, or have worked together, or have used each other's work to be able to do that. And we said all the way at the beginning that when we refer to C.B. Snow, that it's not a new thing. But again, it's also not an old thing. This was just the end of January. This is Professor Alice Roberts, the new Professor of Public Engagement at Birmingham University. And she had one or two things to say to the Telegraph. They were nice, don't worry. She was a bit down on scientists looking like geeks, but we won't go there. One of the things that she said was she was talking about the fact that our school children don't necessarily get a big rounded out education, and she was lauding the students that had done international baccalaureates because they seem to have covered a wider range of topics. So one of the things that she said, and I quote, "I don't think we should be asking people at 16 if they are an artist or a scientist and making them choose between the two." Well, that happened to me actually. In my GCSEs, I was told, no, you can't do art because you can't. It's not that I was bad at it, it's just that I didn't have time. However, our education system has always done this. It is very peculiar to say, no, we are not going to be Renaissance individuals and expect to be literate across the arts, humanities and the scientists. You're going to have to choose between one and the other. And I think that's quite a provocative statement, but one I wholeheartedly agree with. Because I think she's right in this instance. I don't think we get the option to be able to widen our education as we do. I think it's a shame. While we're revisiting the national curriculum, I think it's one of the things that we've got the opportunity to do. While we're talking about basic education, does everybody remember books like this? Okay, Chaucer, the general prologue to Canterbury Tales. It's great. I'm not going to read every bit. However, there we have that. Now, would you rather read that as a textbook at school? Or would you rather read that? Okay, it's a little bit more difficult to read the writing in it. This is a Camouflage Chaucer. Sorry, do you want to tell us where this Camouflage Chaucer was come from?
This is the copy of the Camouflage Chaucer, William Morris's most respected book, which is in the library at the Birmingham Assay Office. It's an incredibly rare book. Only around 270 are fortunate to survive. The print number around 470 originally. It is in the Assay Office library, so if anybody does want to come and see it, it would be lovely to see you. And the reason why this speaks to me in terms of learning and teaching for young people, or perhaps the future of learning and teaching for young people, is that I was very good at English at school. I was a natural reader, I was very inquisitive, I was very good at English. But I wonder sometimes, the people who were in my classroom who weren't so good at English, would they have been inspired to read a little bit more or be more enthusiastic about the texts that they were presented with if they were given a text that looked like that, or if they were given a text that was very plain and very formal, like a standard textbook? So could in the future perhaps we look at the way that we change our teaching materials to actually use those materials to inspire students a little bit more? This is one text, this is the same text that we've just shown you. However, from William Morris's text, you can use this across the curriculum. You can teach students, if you talk about William Morris and his socialism and his politics, you can use that in citizenship class. You can teach in art and design, you can teach all about his wonderful textiles and his wallpaper designs. If you're talking about history or politics of the late 19th century, Morris was a great socialist, he was very revolutionary in his ideas, so you can use him in other aspects of the curriculum. But you can also use him to help young people think about the future and some of the challenges that we face in the future. Morris was a very early environmentalist. All the work that he did for the arts and crafts movement was about turning away from mass production and capitalism and what he saw as the unrestrained production of goods. And I think we're very much living in a society now where we're consuming far too much. And Morris would have been very aware of that if he was around today. So maybe if we think about the materials that we teach our young people with and actually introduce the ideas of teaching perhaps more artistic subjects, the Camouflage Chaucer rather than a plain textbook, we could look at improving our teaching and make it more interdisciplinary, even at a secondary school level before children even get to university. We talked at the beginning of the lecture about the idea of the two cultures that C.P. Snow had mentioned in the 1950s. And I mentioned at the beginning that there's an emerging culture coming through now called the third culture. This really started with the Edge Foundation. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Edge website. If you want a really good update of what's new and going on in the links between arts and science, you can have a look at the Edge website every week. There's always new articles and features being put on there. This is an example of Edge. It says, to arrive at the edge of the world's knowledge, seek out the most complex and sophisticated minds, put them in a room together and have them ask each other questions they are asking themselves. And what they do through the Edge website, the Edge Foundation, is it is a forum for linking artists, such as fine artists or novelists, with scientists, and really pushing this agenda of interdisciplinary work. And they call this the third culture, this idea of artists and scientists coming back together in the future, specifically to talk about and try and solve the world's problems in this very interdisciplinary way. What is also happening in terms of bringing arts and science together and maybe thinking about how they can work more together is, of course, we have social media now, which is bringing people a lot more closer together. We also have the TED Foundation, and again, if you want to watch really good films that feature artists talking about their ideas or scientists talking about their ideas through open lectures, TED is the place to go. You can download and watch lots of videos through their website. But through the power of social media, there are now TED events happening right across the world. Lots of people in cities are getting together to put together forums with speakers across all the disciplines, the arts and the sciences. And there's a TEDx Brum event happening on the 24th of March at Midlands Arts Centre, and they're just taking ticket bookings for that. And the idea of TED is to break down these barriers between the sciences and the arts. And that is the whole point behind the third culture. Can we start to think in a different way, not just think of ourselves as artists and scientists anymore? Is there another way?
There is, and that's where we sort of come to the conclusion of what we have to say. And there are many things that we've talked about, many examples of people that have worked together, people that fortunately have been artists and scientists, polymaths we would call them. There are also people that have managed to work collaboratively. There are people that have had the opportunity to have quite a wide view of the world and the arts and humanities and sciences, which to be honest all dovetail together, and they do need to dovetail together, because it's only in that creative hot pot that we really can start to get down to solving some of the problems that we do face. So the question is, where do we move from here? Well, I mean, this is a question that we've had a thought, we've been thinking about as a nation for a long time. And there were comments the other day in the news about the English Baccalaureate and whether religious education should be included in the English Baccalaureate. Well, why isn't art and art history included in that? Why do we have to take subjects out to get around in education? I think that's silly. So the question is, where do we go from here? What can we do? Well, if you're a teacher, go back, talk with your faculty, think about these things. We're about to have a huge consultation and input into the way that the national curriculum is actually put together. Think about what an opportunity this is for us to be able to affect some measure of change. Now, we've shared our experiences and our thoughts with you, and in the true spirit of the Lunar Society, we don't have all of the answers, but we want to work collaboratively. We want people to give us, well, we want you to give us your ideas. We want to engage everybody to be able to say, well, what can we do? Is there something that I can do based on my experiences? Maybe I've done art history, maybe I've got other examples. Can we revisit our curriculum, for instance, and as Sally said, actually include some resources that are more efficient, that we can get better value from using a different version of choice, so that we can use it in other parts of the curriculum. Can we reuse things across the curriculum so that we do get this better value from it? Is there something that we can do to maybe change the books that we read, change the science that we look at, to be able to do that? That's our final question. We've shared with you our thoughts. Please, we want yours too. I mean, we've had a wonderful time, so really, both Sally and I would like to thank you for the opportunity of being able to share our thoughts with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Sally and John have agreed to take as many questions as you possibly want to throw at them, and they really like tricky questions, so feel free to put them on the spot. The only thing I would ask is if you could wait for me to get you the microphone so that everybody else can hear your questions, that would be wonderful. But if there's anyone brave enough to start us off with a question, thank you.
thanks very much for that talk, which was really interesting. Is the schism that you described perhaps just a Western world schism, or do you see the same dichotomy between the arts and the sciences in Arab cultures and Chinese cultures, for example?
Culture specific, I don't really know. I mean, based on Alice Roberts' comments the other day, she was lauding the fact. Rather than the bit that I didn't print out, actually. No, it's not the bit that I didn't print out. She was saying that in her experience, because she'd been lecturing at Bristol University for a long time, and in her experience, the students that had come in with international baccalaureates were more, how she described them, rounded individuals. They seemed to have a basic knowledge of a lot of different aspects that would all play into how they were learning. I mean, she teaches anthropology and large-scale biology and things like that. She digs up dinosaurs for a living. So how she was managing to bring that in, but she noticed it then and was following it to make the statement to the Telegraph. The rest of it seemed quite coherent. So I did invite her to there, but she's at another event in Birmingham tonight, so she couldn't make it. Otherwise, that would be great for us. However, so no, culture specific, I don't know, but it is something that we need to look at. I think one of the interesting things that we're realising is that in Scandinavian countries, the best. It was in Finland where they were saying, well, we have a nice education system that seems to tick everybody's box and nobody knows about it, and the Finnish students seem to be very happy with it.
They don't national test until they get to a certain age. So their sort of experience, I suppose you could argue that if you're not subjecting younger people to a very rigid and formalised testing system until a certain age, do they then have more time to be creative amongst themselves? Yeah, it's interesting. You could debate it that.
I can yell.
I'm sure you can.
Sally, do you think it's easier for a scientist to become an artist or an artist to become a scientist? And do you think it's possible to do it both ways?
I think it's possible to do it both ways. I would say it's much harder for an artist to become a scientist. Because in my own personal experience and based on people that I know, when I was doing my options at GCSEs, I was one of the first people in the country to do a GCSE. I was very, very good at humanities and art, and I was also very, very good at science. And my teacher said to me, you must choose. Do you want to become a scientist or do you want to become an artist? I was told not to take art at all because it was a subject for less able children, so that was gone. So I did no art past 2 years before my GCSE. And I think it's very, very difficult. So, you know, you have people like Richard Taylor, who is an artist, but he was a scientist before he was an artist. So I think and I don't know what the solution is, you know, this is very utopian thinking throughout, can we work more closely with the arts and sciences, but until we change this problem of making young people to choose between what they want to do when they're in young age, I can't see how there's a problem with it. But I was told that I couldn't do it because the timetable crashed. Simple stuff.
I think sometimes both of them are extremely creative processes, and scientists, I'm sure, would agree with me that sometimes you do have to just stop, look at a problem, and empty everything to be able to think of a way around why is this happening, why did this happen? Anybody that's used Microsoft Word 2007 looks at it and just goes, what? Where does everything go? You have to sometimes think creatively, put yourself in the mind of somebody else to be able to do that. And I think science has this obviously inbuilt need for us to be curious and to be creative, to be able to do that. So while they are similar, there are many different things that cross over between being an artist and being a scientist.
Yeah, I think, and that goes back to the sort of, you think about the original members of the Lunar Society who were polymaths. They did not have this artificial divide between being a scientist, which came later in the 19th century. They were working together and they were interested in solving problems from lots of different perspectives. And that creative aspect, I think, in the days of the Lunar Society is what we should try and get back a little bit more now, rather than being really focused on something else.
We've had enough of being modern man, only to be Renaissance man.
to then think about building in the allowance to fail. If you're talking about being creative, if you're talking about exploring, and I'm not sure we are very comfortable sitting out in this country. I mean, I'm not sure I like the word failure anyway, but I think it's this ability to explore. And I mean, great successes come out of most monumental failures. It just depends, you know, how you view them. But we don't let our children very clued into league tables and successes and pass rates and whatever, which goes back. I mean, I share your experiences of timetable clashes and art being for the less able students. I took art, by the way. But I think we don't allow failure. Or we don't allow, you know, exploration.
And that's, it's all to do with experimentation and exploration, and not always getting it right.
Yeah.
And use Matthew Bolton as an example that he didn't get everything right.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's that ability to not have to just comply all the time and tick a box in terms of a national standard, and letting young people not have this overly competitive attitude towards them at a very young age, where you cannot be allowed to not get it right.
And standardising attainment, you just...
I
mean, you know, okay, so maybe not all children hit the same level but we have sort of, you know, 11, 14, 16, 18, if you don't hit these.
So this problem, this split between arts and sciences, and the whole idea of thinking creatively across disciplines, it starts right very, very early on. And that's where it's got to start to change.
But as well as that, I mean, Jackson Pollock, I mean, we showed something that was a drip painting, and we said, who likes this? Two-thirds of the room said, yeah, we like it, and a third of the room said, no, we don't. So who's to say whether it was a failure or not? I think one of the things that art does is it simplifies people. In the same way that science is nothing but quite violent sometimes between competing theories about how things happen. For instance, in the last few months, can neutrinos travel faster than light? Half of the people saying, no, Einstein would not agree with it. And as it turns out this morning, it was a bit of a damp squib anyway, because it was a loose wire. And it's all been solved and everything gone quiet there now. But it was quite controversial, because people were saying, well, no, you can't make Einstein's rules, but you can. Who was to say which bit is necessarily a failure? I mean, most people have learned from it, and they're going to carry on and do something different as well. Continue with their experimentation, just tweaking it slightly to try and look at some other aspect of it. It's not really a failure. I mean, if we consider anything as being a failure, then we do have a responsibility to, at that stage, stop whatever it is that's happening. But at what stage do scientific process in history do we turn around and say, if Tom Wedgwood, for instance, dallied with photography, if he had at some point turned around and says, I just can't get these pictures to fix, it's rubbish, throw the whole lot out. Guys, don't bother with photography, it don't work. If he'd have done that, then we'd have done a terrible mess. We wouldn't have had any photography, and all the artists would have been complaining, we wouldn't have had that knowledge of the scientific basis for that. And so at some point, even though people fail, it's all right. It's still a step on the ladder. In fact, it was shortly after that that people were able to fix their images, and that's a whole different story, which I'm not going to go into now. But like everything, science, for instance, is based in layers. If we have the opportunity to fail, then that's something okay, but we learn from it. It's not something that damages us. I think it's something that really we should embrace and learn from. It's a process of reflection. Look at something, I did that and I did that wrong. How can I not do it wrong? How can I move on? So that's where I am. At the back. Yes.
I just wanted to ask whether you think our natural state is really to be balanced between arts and science, because if you look at small children, they discover things and create things in equal measure.
Yeah.
And I suppose maybe earlier on sort of in history we would be in that state throughout our lives, and I think we probably get to push down in the direction because of practical education. And I think maybe if you're left to just be creative, and then perhaps you would be a little more balanced.
It's an extremely balanced point. And one of the things that comes into that is that we all do need specialist people. We have people in the room that are specialists in their particular field. People that train over many years to specialise in a specific thing that really helps us. But there's a time for that. There is a time for that. But at some point, we need to have at least a basic education of as much as we can to be able to see that, to be able to decide where we want to specialise, but also at the same time to be able to draw on some of that basic knowledge, and if we find it interesting, to take it further. I mean, I must admit, I didn't really know much about art. As I say, as Kelly said at the beginning, I had a magnet in the garden, that was it. I discovered fire as a boy. Get my iron filings out of the ground. I magnetised all my mom's cutlery with a wire and battery. They're still magnetised today. She hates me for it. But that was the state of things in our house. That was where I naturally fell. But it would have been nice for me to at least have had the opportunity, even at school, to be able to supplement that with knowledge of much wider humanities than just being able to say, well, I'll do geography because it's got 3 field trips.
And I think if we can link the arts and sciences back together more in education, it's not necessarily because everybody needs to leave university and be able to be an artist and a scientist. It's that idea of enrichment and enriching young people's experience of being at school and learning. And if we can do that in a way by linking in arts and sciences, I think yes, very much so. But unfortunately, that's in times of financial woes, it seems to be that it's always the arts subjects that get affected. We're working in a STEM culture now, science, technology, engineering, maths, where the focus is, which necessarily so it has to be. We have huge problems to face in the future, and we need scientists and engineers to help us to sort those out. But it must not ever be at the detriment of the arts. We recognise that. Certainly as a humanities academic, I'm very conscious of that, and the potential challenges that we might face in the future doing what we do.
I'm very wary of time, and people need to get off. So I think we're going to take one more question. Then if anybody else would like to speak to Sally and John, feel free to grab them afterwards. But this gentleman's been waiting very patiently here.
Thank you. Do you not think it's inevitable for art and science to fuse themselves together because of society's discipline and society's need? Let me give you an example, because I'm toying with this idea and I cannot come to any conclusion. In the 60s, there was separation between art and science, and if you become an engineer because of the environment was manufacturing and engineering, then you're slotted in a better employment prospect. Then in the 70s and the 80s, there was the psychology aspect in universities and the courses. And there was fusion with the psychology to the extent where they progressed in the 80s to the social science, no longer just social studies. It was social science. And then progressed further with the crime and development of crime in society, where the police and investigation and the prosecution, it relies more on science and DNA than any other issues. You go back to where you work, Sally, in the assay office. It used to be purely and simply an organization based on the 18th century, where the master has two keys when they open the safe, and they used to go every Friday, the business people, and have their roast beef in a certain place. And furthermore, because I am not sure about the fusion between art and science, the Open University, they started to run courses, BA in technology, while previously technology engineering was BSc. Therefore, there was a marriage between social science, art and science. And therefore, my question is, do you think society will impose its demands on the merger between art and science? I'd be interested in your analysis on this subject.
I don't think there will ever be a case where it will be a demand. I think it might be something that we might want to aim towards. And very much so in terms of the creative aspects of art, perhaps coming into science and business a little bit more as well. So I don't think it will ever be a demand that we will have to do that. I think it will certainly be a choice, and people will either see the benefits of it, perhaps, or they won't, or they will remain very much focused on problem solving through science in a very, in a very traditional way. I think if you have a more rounded background and you have more knowledge of the arts and the sciences, you can see the instances in the past where they have actually worked very closely together, and it might give you ideas as to how you can work with scientists and artists in the future and actually come up with quite creative solutions. So I think it would be a benefit, certainly, and anything that can help us to think more creatively about the problems that we face and how we might find solutions for those, I think would be very good. So certainly not definitely imposed upon, but it would be nice to enrich the way that we think and the way that we try and solve problems, I think.
And it is sometimes thinking creatively. I mean, we've just been in touch with one of our local colleges that deals with universities, that deals with teacher training, and we said, well, can we have a first year undergraduate teacher trainees, please? They did a lot in geography, so they said, I still need to become geography teachers. They said, they've got to do this module. They said, well, can we take them out into the city centre and give them a grounding in the culture of Birmingham from a historical perspective in order to do that, because they're going to have to do field trips and things like that. So now they're actually going to have quite, at the end of the day, quite a wide view of the history of Birmingham, the social aspects that have gone on to that, but also they're going to know and learn and gain skills in how to be able to put together field trips, but also how to be able to relate it to a local knowledge and things like that. I mean, that's getting better value from what they're doing, but sometimes it's how you approach a particular problem is the way to solve it. You could take them up to the marsh and point the way the streams bend and say, well, here's a field trip, do it this way. But I think doing it a different way is a way that you can fuse it. You can point out the architecture, and you can learn so much more about the people that built Birmingham and the people that made Birmingham beautiful in some aspects. There are aspects of Birmingham that even if you walk around, you don't notice. And as somebody points them out and goes, oh, that's so-and-so, you go, and there's the pictures, wow, I didn't know that. That's hidden by a sign almost. It looks beautiful. I never noticed it before. It's expanding that knowledge. I think that really, I don't know, once you start to gain a little bit of knowledge, and once you start to see the value in something being bigger than its individual parts, it's then that you start to want to know a little bit more, and you start to get a little bit hungry for knowledge, and you start to find a little bit, I know more about something, and it piques your own curiosity to the point where, well, you start off and you've gone on your own, you then start to grab knowledge from anywhere to try and feed that into what you already know, because by the time we've reached a certain age, we've specialised and we've got one set of knowledge and that's it. And it's a shame that we don't ever revisit and think, wow, actually, well, that's really interesting, I just learned something new. That fits really well. I can use that as an example in my teaching. I mean, I teach a session that deals with how we respond to computer programs and how to build computer programs in psychology. At one point, I quote Dostoevsky, and which is kind of a bit bizarre. Students are going, who? Dostoevsky, who? And yet, I use that because it tells the part. I wouldn't know that unless I read Dostoevsky. I'm a scientist, so I'm not meant to have read Dostoevsky. But it's bringing the things together, and the more you start to look at them, then the more you start to bring them in. And I think it enriches the teaching experience. And certainly from a teaching point of view, I think it's great to be able to draw on different contexts, different examples, different stories, to be able to make something that is quite a unique learning experience, because once you can inspire the wanting to learn, you really do get people engaged into that sort of.
I just mentioned there's some leaflets outside. If anybody wants to know more about all sorts of topics, we've got the emergence of the West Midlands Cultures, Communities and Change Conference at the University of Birmingham in March, in which there are speakers drawn from lots of different historical disciplines and bringing lots of different perspectives. To that, Jon and I are giving a paper about the early experiments in photography around the Lunar Society. There's also a day school in conjunction with the University of Birmingham about the Birmingham Jewellery Court, past, present and future at the assay office. There's some leaflets outside, if anybody's interested.
So if you do want to grasp a little bit of extra knowledge about something that you weren't expecting to have learned tonight, please come join please come join us at the conferences because they're really exciting. It's not even...
Oh, sorry, can you stop sneaking out the back, please? Exits down the front here.
As he said at the front.
It's not particularly an area that you would have thought of attending. This is your opportunity to be a little bit interdisciplinary. So if you're a scientist and you've never heard of the emergence of the West Midlands cultures, please, come on, grab a leaflet, help yourself, come on, we should do it.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Lunar Society, thank you very much for coming along this evening. If you would like any further information on the Lunar Society, you can sign up, become a member. There's a series of events throughout the year, different venues, locations, topics, themes, that sort of thing. Please speak to Kate or Dipali. They can give you all the necessary information that you need. Otherwise, if you could all join me in thanking Sally and John. And finally, I'd just like to wish you all a very safe and pleasant journey home via the doors at the front, not trying to sneak out the museum at the back. Thank you very much.